What a beautiful Sunday this is of call and commitment, a reality that God calls anyone and at times every one of us to service. And if you've been in my office over the last few years, you'll realize that the bar is pretty low for who God is going to call, because you'll have seen the unique items that fill some of the space in my office where previous officers probably had books and all their commentaries and all of those things. Although I like to think that perhaps Colonel Rowe had similar decorating taste to what I do. Because if you walk in my office this morning, you'll see shelves full of what I'm going to call action figures. So things like this, and this, and these guys here. You may be thinking that's a lot of toys for a grown man to have, but this is only a small portion of what is there, because there's also Darth Vader and Iron Man that are a part of this collection of things that are in my office. Now you'll notice that a few of these are outside of their boxes and other ones are still within it. Mostly that's laziness, because I just got tired of taking them out and I've left them in there, but it's also because there's a variety of things that you can do with these toys. You can leave them in their box, preserved and safe, so that they can be seen, yes, but not played with or destroyed or get dirty. That over time, perhaps by remaining in their original packaging, that they'll gain value. They'll be worth more money down the road because they're kept in this pristine condition. Or, like these ones here, they can be taken out. You'll notice if you get close enough to them, that some of them are a little bit banged up. Their heads kind of tilt a little bit to the side because they've been played with by my kids. They're a little bit dirty at times because they have been held and displayed out in the open. They're not very dusty, so I thank Steve and Jennifer for probably going in and dusting over the top of them for me. But being put in this position coming with a great deal of risk, but ultimately leading to fulfilling their purpose because they are, after all, toys. And while I probably shouldn't be comparing deep theological concepts to Funko Pops or Jesus to this Michael Jordan that's right here at the front, I'm going to do it over the next few minutes, so just bear with me. Because in our passage, Jesus finds himself in a similar position to these toys. John records earlier in chapter 12 that Jesus has come to Jerusalem for the Passover festival. He's been celebrated by the people as he's entered into the city. People from all over the known world had gathered at this time, those born into the faith, those who had converted, and those who just were hearing what was going on. And among this group we read in our passage this morning is a number of Greek believers, Gentiles who had journeyed there and hearing about Jesus came to Philip. And they say, "Sir, we would like to see Jesus." Now, Philip, being a good disciple, brings this request to Andrew for some reason, and then they go together to bring it to Jesus. Now, this would seem like a simple question and answer they're looking for. The people want to meet him, so it's either a yes, he's available, or no, he is not. But Jesus, in hearing the question, as we read earlier, responds, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly, I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant will be. My Father will honor the one who serves me." Now, I can imagine in reading that over this week, Philip and Andrew looking at each other and wondering, how are we going to take that and explain it to the Greeks who had asked us to meet with them? Andrew most likely pointing to Philip as if to say, "You're the one that brought this to me, so you go explain that to them." Both of them wondering how such a simple question became such a complex response. But Jesus knew that this moment was bigger than just the request, that there was more at stake for him and for the world in that moment. There was a lesson that could be learned by his disciples in this moment to carry them through the days that were to come. That these Greek believers coming meant that the world was taking notice. That people from places he'd never been, those who had never seen him do the miraculous signs, had heard and were starting to believe. That his following here on earth was growing. That there was perhaps a buzz around his name. That this was a pivotal moment in his earthly journey because he knew what was coming and an alternative was right in front of him. Jesus, in some ways, was at a fork in the road. One way, earthly glory for himself. The other, heavenly glory for God. That if he wanted to, he could use this opportunity to capitalize on it. He could make this moment about continuing to build his name, to increase the number of his followers, to expand his recognition, and to build his comfort here on earth. Or he could go through with the plan that he'd been born to carry out, the one that had been set in motion since the beginning of time. Jesus was caught at a moment where he was going to need to choose whether or not to stand safely on the sidelines, to remain on the shelf in the box, or to take a risk, to enter into the plans of God, to perhaps get a little damaged or dirty by offering himself in service as only he could. Where Jesus, the man, could be glorified for who he was on earth, or Jesus, the Son of God, could be glorified for who he was created to be. Jesus, as he did throughout his earthly life, obviously chose to do it God's way, to build the heavenly kingdom. He chose loving obedience to the will of God, ministry for the Father in service to others as the way that he would live the rest of his life. And because he's much better at this stuff than I am, Jesus uses a reference that was actually applicable to the people who were listening to him at that time. Because Jesus, in explaining this to disciples, uses the example of a kernel of wheat. A single seed that when left on its own is pretty good. Actually, it's highly versatile, I read this week. It can be used for being milled into fresh flour, or it can be ground for bread and cakes and pasta, boiled for salads and soups, or used in hot cereal. But those are temporary uses, only making a small impact before being forgotten and gone forever. But in order for it to continue to meet a larger purpose, that seed, Jesus is saying, must be broken open, planted in the ground, and then cultivated to produce new life, to multiply, producing many seeds. Jesus highlighting for the disciples that in order for there to be real growth in the kingdom, for his purpose to be fulfilled, that he was going to need to step out in faith, to offer himself for others, to lay down his own life and be broken and buried. To choose service to God, for God and to others in that moment. Service that Jesus in this passage tells the disciples and us in reading it today is the only answer to the call to follow him. That whoever follows him must offer themselves in service to him and ultimately to others. That they will need to make that same choice that he's making as well, to be willing to set themselves aside, that we need to be willing to set ourselves aside. What we want, what we can gain, what it will cost us, as we heard last week, and choose, as Jesus did, to lay down our lives in service for God and to others. To be willing to lay everything down. Position and pride, possessions and prominence, privilege, and so much more. To do what he's calling us to do. To feed the hungry. To give water to the thirsty. To welcome the stranger. To clothe the naked. To visit the prisoner and care for the sick, as Jesus says in Matthew chapter 25. To accept those society looks down on or care for those who are unable to care for themselves. To love God with all our hearts, minds, spirits, and strength. To love others above ourselves. To be willing to offer ourselves to be a voice for the voiceless, whatever that might mean for us on a personal level. Jesus in this story was calling them and calling us today to step into the will and plans of God, to offer themselves and ourselves in service for God and to others, no matter the cost. Service that ultimately will bring blessings to us. But as we read in the closing moments of our passage, Jesus also acknowledged that service to him will come with challenges. In considering this, Jesus says in verses 27 to 28, "My soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. No, it was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name." Jesus acknowledging the catch to a life of service, that true service to him requires sacrifice for us, that it's not going to be easy. It means working against the very nature of human existence, the way the world teaches us to make our decisions and to live our lives. That there will be times where the act of service will be something we don't want to do, where what we're being asked to offer will feel outside of our comfort zones, where it will require more of us than we think we're able to give. That it might be made and we won't know the effect of it as much as we might want to. We won't see the fruit of that labor. That loving, obedient service to God will mean trusting that there is a larger purpose for it all, even when we can't see it. Jesus is reminding of that because love is not convenient. It means doing things we don't want to be doing them for and with people we might not want to be around. That it's not about being spared from those things, but choosing them in order to glorify him. He's also letting them in on the secret that obedience is not painless, that it will require loss. Loss of the future we hoped for, the way we want to do things. That it ultimately meant for Jesus lowering himself to become like us, to go to the cross to take on death and shame when the easy thing would have been to remain in heaven and leave us to deal with our sin problem ourselves. Or in coming to take the adulation of the people and to just stay and build a kingdom here. But his service was what was needed for God's kingdom to be wide open for everyone. For the gap to be closed between God and humanity that was formed at the fall in Genesis 3. That like the seed, Jesus would need to die in order for more to come to faith. He would need to offer himself and trust a harvest would come. This was the very heart of service that Jesus was demonstrating to the disciples in this story and that we're to explore for ourselves this morning. That we're to understand that service is being willing to commit to unseen acts of faithfulness. At times offering ourselves for tireless acts of unthanked labor and pouring ourselves out with no guarantee that there will be results from our efforts or that we will be around to see what comes from our actions. But trusting that if we are choosing a life of service for God and to others, that if we're choosing a life lived for him, that no act of service we will make will be wasted. That by choosing to lay down our lives literally or figuratively for him, we are planting the seeds of faith that will lead to countless others in the generations to come to find their place in the family of God as well. That, friends, in order to truly be a follower of Jesus, we must be willing to live a life of service for God, no matter where we are on our spiritual or physical journey right now. That each day we need to ask ourselves a question: what purpose am I serving? Are we content, you and I, us as a church family, to stay on the shelf in the box? Content to be safe, to be comfortable, to be like the head of wheat and be used to do some good for a little while, to make some memories, to perhaps increase our value to the world and to others, to just amount to something from an earthly perspective, here today and gone tomorrow? Or are we willing, You and I, us to be brought down off the shelf, to be opened up and to be used for our intended purpose, to be like the seed that is planted in the ground in order to multiply into seeds that will feed generations to come. Are we willing to be available, obedient, and used for God's greater plans even though we don't know them? Even though we may never understand them and may never know the impact we're having on the lives of others? Are we willing to offer ourselves in service through ministries here at the core, like assisting with community events or funerals, coming to cleanup days, or being part of a committee, using your skills, your education, and your experience to teach our young people, to lead a program for our seniors, to bring people together for fellowship, or create something new that's needed to meet a need? To offer ourselves to serve our community through the food bank, to come on a Sunday and not just worship, which, yes, is a good thing, but to offer to be part of the service that goes on here, to be part of the welcome team, making sure everyone knows there's a place for them here, to join the ushering team and help people literally find their place in our church family, or being part of the operations team, helping them get connected to our church family through things like the welcome packets and the directory and all of that stuff. To offer yourself in service by sharing the good news with people at work or school or where you volunteer or in our communities. Because friends, God has called and uniquely gifted you for service to Him. There are things that only you can do. Places only you will go, people only you can reach. Things here that only you can do in order for us to be who God has called and created us as a church family to be. So if you're sitting here this morning thinking, all of this is great, but I don't think God is calling me. I don't know who God has, what God is calling me to, or where I can serve Him. Please come and see me after the service. Come and see Captain Colleen. Come and see someone else, and we can help you with that. We can help you find where your gifts are, where you belong, where God wants to use you, how He's been preparing you for such a time as this. Now, it might not look like you want it to or would have expected it to be. It might cost you more in time and talents and treasures than you might have hoped it would. It might mean stepping out of your comfort zone, but doing it, trusting it. You will be blessed, others will be blessed through your efforts, and God ultimately will be glorified. Friends, a life of service might mean getting a little dirty. It might come with a little bit of damage, but it will mean meeting our purpose in Him. That we can trust it will mean that His kingdom will grow as our efforts glorify Him. So church, this morning, who's ready to step outside the box and live a life of service for Him?